Just gonna move that a little bit, give me a little bit nicer of an angle. There we go. It's podcast time, everybody. I know it's the time you all look forward to the most in the day. Honestly, it is absolutely one of the times I look forward to during my day. I look forward to a lot. My life's pretty sweet, but this is definitely one of the things that I always enjoy about my day. So I appreciate everybody as you tune in. Make sure that you share the show with a friend, with a teammate, with somebody who's going to benefit from hearing this message. Because as always, the path of being an athlete is not a clear one. The path of being an athlete, there's a lot involved in it. There's a lot of things you need to know about, a lot of things you need to work on. And really and truly, the goal of this show is to just help clarify some of that path, to help you level up in some of these areas that you might not know as much about, or you might not be as clear about, or you might be listening to the wrong people within those areas. And excuse me. So today, we're going to be talking about coming back from a loss. We're going to be talking about coming back from a loss because this is something that unfortunately most athletes out there are going to deal with at some point or another. And it's something that's very, very important to learn how to deal with properly if you want a long career in your sport. But let's get into the show. Let's get into the podcast. Let's start this thing. Let's go in 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Elite Development Podcast, the #1 show for athletes looking to gain an edge on their opponents and build their dream careers in sport. I'm your host, Kenny Dusseault, and today we are talking about coming back from a loss. Now, the reason we're talking about this is because this is something that every athlete is going to have to deal with at some point or another. You're going to have to deal with adversity, whether that's a loss in competition or loss in other areas. Adversity is going to strike, and I want to make sure that you are prepared to deal with it when it comes. So the #1 thing that I want to touch on with this is an age-old quote from, I believe, Conor McGregor's coach, John Kavanagh, was the first one that I heard using it. It might have come from somewhere else before that, but that's where I'm going to originate it. If that's not the original source of the quote, then I apologize in advance. But you win or you learn. Taking a loss as an opportunity to learn is one of the most important things that you can ever do. See, I see athletes a lot that, will lose a fight and their only focus is, oh, I should have won. I got robbed on the scorecards. I clearly won round 1 and 2, or like they've got their excuses or they've got their reasons, or they're just, convinced that it wasn't actually a loss. Or the other thing I see a lot from athletes is this one I remember from when Jake Paul fought Tommy Fury. And honestly, nothing against Jake Paul, the dude's doing his thing, but when he fought Tommy Fury and immediately when he gets handed the mic after the fight, he goes, oh, I was sick in camp and I injured my arm, and then he had all these other reasons and, problems and things that's why he lost the fight, when in reality, he fought a guy with more experience that was actually his size, actually his sport, and he just got beat. And maybe he was sick, maybe he did injure his arm, but Tommy Fury just beat him. And I remember even hearing him coming into the fight this weekend against Nate Diaz, talking about how he didn't rewatch the Tommy Fury fight even once because it would hurt him more than it would help him. And yikes. Again, you do you, but when I heard that was extremely concerning because there were a lot of flaws in his game. And I'm not sitting here saying that, I could beat him, or sitting here saying that, he's a horrible boxer. Do I think he's world class? No. But do I think he's a decent boxer? Yeah. He's showing that he can fight. He might be fighting older MMA guys, but a guy with no training goes into a fight against Anderson Silva, Tyron Woodley, any of these guys, probably fucking loses really badly. So the dude can fight, but the fact that he's not looking back at that Tommy Fury fight and figuring out what kind of problems that he had and how he can fix them coming into the next one tells me he is not going to be a world champion. Time will tell. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what that tells me. And the other thing, so when it comes to learning from your losses, as hard as it might be to do, learning from your losses is the most important thing you can do, because this is going to help you see where you went wrong. This is going to help you understand what you need to fix moving forward in your career. And this is going to help you get better. One of my favorite examples actually also just happened recently was Justin Gaethje coming back and beating Dustin Poirier. Justin Gaethje lost to Dustin Poirier 5 years ago with a crazy, wild style. And Justin said that was the catalyst for him for change. He realized that if he was going to come through and win a UFC championship, he couldn't keep up this wild style that he had carried through for most of his career. He had to actually, be more defensively sound. He had to level up his game in order to come through and actually get to that top level that he's been looking for. And boy, did he ever show it. They fought at UFC 291 just within the last couple of weeks here. And he KO'd Dustin Poirier with a head kick. And he got hit a couple of times, but he wasn't wild. He wasn't crazy. He was controlled, calm, measured, and it paid off. And so taking the opportunity, understanding that if you get beat, first of all, that's okay. Loss is going to happen. You don't have to excuse it. But if you get beat, take that as the opportunity to understand where you're weak. Take that as the opportunity to understand what you need to fix. And if you can understand what you need to fix, then you can come into the next opportunity a better version of yourself and put yourself, like Justin Gaethje did, in a position to now fight for a world championship. So, number one, make sure that you are taking losing as an opportunity to learn. Number two, develop a comeback plan. Now, the important thing behind developing a comeback plan is what I've seen a lot of athletes do is they lose a fight and then immediately they're like, okay, I just need to get back in there. And I understand why you want to, because you don't want to sit with that loss. But what can happen to you is if you get back in there without really taking the time, without really taking the lessons from it, without really making the improvements that you needed to make, then you're going to get back in there. You're going to get back in there too quickly. And then if you get that back in there too quickly, bad things are going to happen again. Right? But by taking the time you need, if you see, okay, I lost potentially because of this, this, and that reason, now take the time and create a plan to fix those issues before you get back in there. Right? Because instead of fighting 3 more times, not having the problems fixed, and then losing 3 more times, take the time to say, okay, I'm struggling in these areas. And if I really want to break through to the next level, I need to fix these problems. And take the time and build out a plan to fix the problems that you have so that the next time you get back in there, you can confidently move past those issues that you were having. Does this mean that the next time you get back in there, you're going to win for sure? Of course not. It's still a competition. It's still a fight. Everybody still has a chance. But you're consciously and intentionally making improvements to your game that are going to help you long term instead of just saying, I don't want to sit on a loss, get me another fight right away. And if you take that first approach, I don't want to sit on a loss, get me another fight right away, does it mean that you're going to lose your next fight? Of course not. Not necessarily. But when the only thing you're tied to is the outcome, then you're going to be in a lot more trouble because you're not going to see the benefit of taking the time away and actually putting together a game plan to come back better. One of my favorite examples of that is actually one of my athletes, Tim Smith. He's a local guy. He's got 30 plus pro fights now. And he was the unified MMA champion in Canada. And he came back, some personal issues. He was away for a long time. And when he came back, I believe he lost 4 in a row. And he had just started working with me like 3 weeks before that 4th fight. And so we didn't really have a lot of time. We did a little bit of work. We got a little bit of improvement, but he still ended up losing. And then he retired in the cage. And when he retired in the cage, I thought, man, it's too bad. Like, I would have loved to, see him be able to come back, get his title back, really just like make sure that he can end his career on a good note. Like, he was 38 when he came back. So I figured, the UFC is probably out of the question, but at least finish with that unified title again, get him back to the former glory. But he retired in the cage, and I thought, too bad, but what are we going to do? And then a week later, I got a call from him, and he said, no, not like that. And so my initial reaction was, okay, well, what's going to be different? Like, why do you want to do this again? And he said, like, I've got more in me than that, and I'm ready to prove it. It's like, I'm bringing you on. I'm bringing on a nutritionist to help me with my weight cut. I'm getting back to my real weight class, which was 155, and I'm bringing on a mental performance coach to help me through some mental blocks that I'm dealing with too. And then he wanted to take a fight that was about 10 weeks later. And I told him, you know what? Take some time. Let's really let all of these things take shape. And so instead, he took 8 months off, but we trained our asses off during those 8 months. He was working with his mental performance coach. He was working with his nutritionist. He was breaking through mental barriers that he'd been dealing with for years. His strength and conditioning was on point for the first time ever. His weight was actually an easy cut down to 55 instead of killing himself the way he would usually do it back in the day. And then when he got back into the cage after those 8 months of actually putting together a game plan, figuring out what his weaknesses were, correcting them, and then giving them time to actually put into action, he came back, and at 38 years old, he put on a Fight of the Year performance. He won Fight of the Year in Canada, got his first win since 2013. This was in 2022, so 9 years between wins, and is now setting himself up to fight for the championship that he was stripped of 10 years ago after his 40th birthday because he put together a proper game plan. Whereas before, that 4-fight losing streak that he was on, he was ready to come back. He took a fight at a weight class that was too high. He lost. Then he jumped right back into another fight camp, didn't really correct the problems that he was having, lost again. Did that 4 times. But then when he actually set up and said, okay, it's time to put together a game plan, it's time to figure out what I was doing wrong and actually fix the problem, he went from retiring in the cage to retiring in the cage on a 4-fight losing streak to setting himself up to fight for a championship later this year. That is the difference between just jumping in and doing it again and actually setting up a game plan for a comeback and a game plan for success. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is preparation. When it comes to coming back from a loss, one of the absolute key things that you need to focus on is your preparation. One of the key things you need to focus on is your preparation. You need to put yourself in a position, both physically and mentally, that you are ready to come back. Because again, your skill set might be on point. You might just get caught with a shot that you didn't see. Like, things happen in this game. But if you are not putting together the actual proper plan to get yourself physically and mentally ready, you're going to struggle. And so a lot of the time when people are coming back from losses, they're dealing with some self-doubt because, you lost last time. Maybe you got knocked out. Maybe it was a bad finish. And if it was, you're probably not feeling super confident in yourself coming into the next one. And that's natural. The first thing I want to really touch on is that's okay to feel that. Don't just try to shove it down, because if you just try to shove it down, you're not actually going to make those feelings go away. You're just going to make them come out worse. So mentally, you need to work on why you're feeling those things so that you can work through them. Because if you spend time actually working on why you're feeling these things, why you're having these issues, why you're struggling, now mentally you can make these breakthroughs as well. Well, I'm struggling because I got knocked out in my last fight, and I'm worried that even though I do everything properly, I'm going to get knocked out again. Okay, so within the camp, we need to put more effort into defenses, into making sure that I'm defensively sound, put effort into the gas tank so that in round 3, 4, 5, I'm just as confident and comfortable as I am in round 1 and 2, and just make sure that we're put every bit that can actually come into play that is going to help that concern is being worked on, is being thought of, is being properly and intentionally prepared for. And again, I'll say it again, if you do these things properly, if you take that all into account, does that mean that you're not going to lose your next one? Of course not. It's a tough business and you might lose again. But if you're mentally and physically preparing based off of the result that you weren't happy about and you're making the appropriate changes to fix the problem, you're going to be able to rely a lot more on the confidence that, well, I got knocked out by this type of shot and I've put X amount more time into defending those shots. I've worked with a bunch of different training partners that specialize in these areas that I was weaker. I've improved my strength and conditioning and made sure that, I'm going to be reacting faster in those later rounds. I've done all the work I can do. Now, there's still unpredictability. There's still things that are going to happen. This is not a magical, now you win every single time you fight, but you're going to be able to put yourself in a much more confident state. And if you can put yourself in a much more confident state, you have that much better of a chance of winning, because the mental side of the game is huge, guys. Putting yourself in a confident state, being able to come in feeling prepared, feeling ready, feeling like you're in a position to be successful is so much more important than people realize. Your skill set can be on point, but if you crumble under pressure, you're fucked. So make sure that you're working on the mental side too, if you actually want to succeed. So guys, to summarize, coming back from a loss, number one, look at it as a learning opportunity. Stop trying to justify it. Stop trying to make excuses for it. Stop trying to pretend that it was a robbery or it was this or it was that, because those things might be valid, but you still lost. If you lose on the scorecards and you feel like it was a robbery, you might be right. But you need to do that much more to make sure that the next time you fight, you are so far ahead that there is no possible way that the judges go the other way. Right? And that's the attitude of someone that's actually going to continue to see success. Whereas the one who just looks at it and says, I got robbed, I did everything right, and the judges fucked me, is only going to go so far. Number two, make sure that you are developing a comeback plan. You're not just saying, get me in there on the next card as fast as possible and let me do it again and let me correct the wrong. Plan out how you're going to correct the wrong. Plan out what you need to do in order to correct the wrong, and then actually spend time executing on that plan before you jump back into competition. And number three, be physically and mentally prepared in order to right the wrong. Be physically and mentally prepared in order to right the wrong, because if you were just going back at it and, doing the same type of training that you were before, you're going to have that same self-doubt, because if you don't, because if you did that type of training before, the result didn't go your way, what's to say it won't happen again? But if you change up some of your focus, change up a little bit about how you're training, level up what you're doing while you're training, you're going to be able to come into that next fight in a more confident state. And then mentally, you're going to feel better, which is going to allow you to perform better as well. So guys, I appreciate you all for tuning in. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. As always, my main ask of you is share the show with a friend, share the show with a teammate, share the show with somebody who needs to hear this message. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. We'll catch you on the next episode.